Hey guys, and welcome back. This is my Ableton journal. In today's journal entry, I want to show you this really cool little technique that I discovered over the last couple of weeks when I was experimenting more with convolution reverbs. So my idea here is that I'm going to show you the basic technique in a simpler project than the one I've been working on lately, and then I can show you afterwards how I've applied this exact same technique to this working track here. So, before we begin, I just wanted to give a tiny bit of backstory to what's going on here. Because lately I have been experimenting a lot more with convolution reverbs. And as I've mentioned in my previous videos, I have found them to be extremely useful in terms of getting really complex and interesting, dense, textured, rhythmic, non-rhythmic results really quickly. And the thing with convolution reverbs is that they use audio samples to generate the reverb. I'm not going to get into the specifics on how they work because frankly, I don't know and I don't want to spend time doing that as well. But regardless, I was browsing around online for third-party impulse responses and I came across the homepage of Echospace. Echospace is a really famous dub techno record label that in addition to releasing music both digitally and on vinyl, they do also have a big collection of impulse response libraries as well as sample libraries. And it was when I was browsing through their selection of impulse responses that I came across one pack that I was about to buy, but then I read in the description saying these impulse responses were recordings of the signal chains that CV313 used in the production of one of his albums. Now, this got me thinking that, yes, I could definitely just go ahead and buy one pack of those impulse responses, use those, and go on with my life. That would probably be the easiest. But it struck me that instead of spending $30 on that pack, what if I, for starters, try to just emulate what I think that process would look like. So I ended up recording a section of my chord sounds and I chucked that into an impulse response through an OTT on the top of it. And in doing so, I really felt that, wow, the results I was getting was like far beyond what I've been able to achieve in the past using just regular delays and reverbs. All right, so enough talking about this. Let's dive right into the technicalities of this technique. So for this example, I have set up a more simple beat and it sounds a bit like this. So it's sounding quite nice, and what really is making the difference here, I feel, is this convolution reverb that has a section of the resample audio. We can take a listen to how it sounds without this send enabled. You see, it still sounds nice. It still sounds kind of cool and kind of interesting. But I really feel like the magic sauce here is definitely this send, which is this convolution reverb. You see? Now, if we take a listen to this in solo, it sounds quite messy, to be honest. And on top of that, I even had to use 2 instances of OTT to get these textures up to an audible level at all. So I'm going to recreate this from scratch now. I'm not going to do all the chord sounds or the drums because they are pretty basic. And I'm thinking that you can recreate this effect just using your own imagination. For what it's worth, I am using a selection of different chord stabs. I don't tend to synthesize my kicks all too often on this main lead chord, the one that's doing the calling. I do have just a splash of echo. I have a spring reverb, that's an amp spring bright reverb, one section of amp and one instance of cabinet. And the reason for this is simply that I wanted to make the sound like guitar-ish, because I really feel like I've been hearing a lot of guitar-like chord stabs, especially in older Maurizio tracks. And in the example we're going to check out afterwards, I am also using one instance of Guitar Rig with just a preset there, but I wanted to try and recreate this using more stock plugins. So you can copy these settings if you want, just pause the video to get the exact parameters if you so desire. Moving on, we're on chord stab number 2. Again, it's a simple sound, but I did take the time to just program it in a bit of variations in the note patterns here. As you can see, I've been manually shifting notes backwards in time just a tiny bit, just to add some more variation. And I'm also working with a 4-bar loop, and I'm using the Octatrack 16 Swing 52 to just add in some rhythmic tension here, essentially. These two combined, or before we do that, let's take a look at my sends. For my A send, I'm using little plates, just a plate reverb. Here you can use the stock stuff that comes with Ableton if you want. On B send, I'm using, again, delay and a reverb. On send number C, I am using, as per always, the UAD Galaxy Tape Echo, the RE201 Space Echo emulation, and I'm just using this dub slap preset, and this preset has just been sitting here for the longest time now, and the reason for that is just that I think it sounds really nice. On send number D, we again have a splash of spring reverb. This is a fake long spring mono preset. So essentially, like, you could go ahead and send these individually to each of the sends if you want, which is what I've done. And in combination, it's gonna sound a bit like this. The next logical thing here would be to set up an empty audio channel. Let's rename this to resample. And then we're just gonna select the input to be resampling. And now let's solo these chords, so we're only getting the chords and the sends. Press and hold Control or Command while hitting the record arm button here. And then let's just hit record. So there we go, 4 bars should be more than enough for this technique. And then let's set up a new return channel. You can just right click an existing return channel and hit, no, you can't. Oh, there we go. Just hit insert return channel, or you can press Alt, Command and T. And here we're gonna load up Convolution Reverb Pro. And then the only thing we're gonna do is drag this resample audio into the reverb. Now that this is set up, one thing that I do like to do is I tend to EQ out a lot of the bass frequencies coming into this chain, simply because I don't want it to be too muddy coming out of it again. I do have a tendency to want to emphasize the top end of these kind of sounds also, just because I think it sounds nice. So if we then send our chord group into this send, let's take a listen to how it sounds in solo. You see? So it almost sounds like a bit too resonant, a bit too nasty. And if that's the case, we can see here on this area in the EQ that we can actually just go ahead and reduce the amount of volume of that certain specific frequency coming into the reverb. Could also be an idea to go in and use the damp EQ on that specific frequency. We can see that little peak right here. And as you can tell, the challenge here is obviously that it will end up often sounding way too quiet. So to mitigate that, what I tend to do, as you have seen a couple of times probably, is just to chuck an OTT on top here and reduce the amount. And it's, if you can tell, it's specifically that high-end frequency area that I'm interested in capturing. It's like this area, like the higher frequencies, or around this section. Because I do feel like the boominess of this isn't going to be like too nice, and this area is going to be conflicting with the main body of our two chord sounds, so it could be nice to just EQ out that a bit. What's also really nice I've found is to set up another return channel, and on this I'd like to have a super big reverb, so I'm gonna go with the Soundtoys SpaceBlender. So let's drag the mix all the way up to 100%, set the time to something like 12 seconds maybe, And then I tend to want to skew it more. Like I tend to want to drag the color button to the left, and doing so is going to lower the higher frequencies and boost the lower frequencies a bit, just to round it off a bit more and make sure it's not too harsh. So then if we enable the send on our convolution reverb and send that back into the SpaceBlender, then you're going to get this really nice little pad going in the background, which is also going to help fill out your mix more. And this too is a bit quiet. So here I tend to use OTT, disable the high bands and reduce the amount just a tiny bit. And now, another thing that's worth mentioning here is that if we increase the size parameter, it's gonna mess with the pitch of this reverb actually. Let's take a listen to how this sounds, because now we can tell that it sounds more or less exactly the same as the resample audio that we did earlier. But if we increase this to 200%, you can hear that what's basically happening is that we're pitching down our sample a full octave. And then because of that, it also tends to get quite quiet again. So then we're just going to duplicate the OTT. And again, just remove some of the highs, reduce the amount a bit. This is the basis of the technique. It's very hands-on, and what I really like about this technique is that it's a technique that really invites a lot of experimentation to what kind of sounds you can chuck into that convolution reverb, and you can play around with the parameters of the convolution reverb as well to get very, very different results, all depending on how you process it and what kind of sounds you're sending into it. That being said, let's take a final listen to this example with all the bells and whistles enabled, and I'm gonna try and A/B everything as we go, so you can get a full picture of like how big of a difference this technique actually makes. So there you have it. Hopefully you get the idea. It's a relatively easy technique in my head, seeing how the only thing you need to do is to resample bits of your track and then use that as an impulse response in a convolution reverb, and then start sending stuff into that convolution reverb again to really get it going. Okay, so we're back in the original track that I showed at the start of this video, and let's just take a small listen again here to what's going on. Again, hopefully you can see how an insane amount of difference this technique does. I feel like if we disable both SpaceBlender and this dense texture send, all of a sudden, all that depth that we had, all that movement is completely gone. And the only main difference is that for this send here, I'm using a good amount of chorus. And yeah, that's it. Chorus and crystallizer, which I've chucked on here just to create even more deeper down-pitched versions of that delay. See, this is great. This is sounding so good to my ears. And then if you add in SpaceBlender here, and here also I've added one instance of chorus, which is giving you that kind of sound, which I feel like is all over the place on CV313's music. Alright, so that's it for this week's video. I really hope it was useful, and if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section down below. I am going to be linking all of the different devices that I've used in both examples in the video description, as well as any necessary links that I might have mentioned for web pages and stuff like that. Lastly, I am still offering one-on-one Ableton Live music production coaching for anyone who wants to try and level up their music production or mindset skills. If you're curious to knowing more about me and what I have to offer, you can check out the link at the very bottom of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.